The three stages of boat life, also known as excitement, what have I done, and acceptance. For me, the excitement phase and the build-up and looking forward to boat life was quite a drawn-out process over about 2 years. I had the idea of living on a boat when I was about 22, 23 years old, and then it took me until 25 to get the funds together to get on board and get on the water. And so during that time, it was a strange time, just on the cusp of the transition between the old world and the modern internet and everything being on YouTube. So at that point, there were no boating YouTube channels and things like that I could look at to get a better idea of boat life and to educate myself about things a little bit better. So for me, the excitement phase was all about biking and walking out to the canal and along the towpath, and the daydreaming and looking at other people on boats and thinking, wow, will that be me in a couple of years' time, moored up on this very stretch of canal, as if it was some sort of mythological, impossible, unattainable thing to achieve. And so, of course, getting that first boat at the age of 25, I was still just about young enough that the world hadn't beat me down and the real nature of reality hadn't gotten to me yet. So I had this huge swell of excitement, but I was also a very sort of nervous, immature character for my age too. And so once I'd got that boat and had the initial first amazing experiences and so on, I rapidly started to mingle that in with the second phase of boat life, very much the what have I done phase. So I would say that the realisation that the boat is now your responsibility, both the good parts and the bad parts, is probably only truly and fully accepted and realised when you have your first problem on board. And for me, that problem came within the first week or so, when I was starting up and going to move the boat for the first time ever on my own, and within moments of switching the ignition on, beeping started. I started to panic immediately, and then my panic was not made any better when there was a big puff sound and a load of steam came up from below the deck boards and the engine died. And so that very much definitely, like you say, a week or so into boat life, made me look around at my surroundings, miles from anywhere and anybody I knew, and go, what have I done? On a serious note though, I would say that apart from the basics of safety when you're living full-time on and around water and obviously travelling by boat, the main things that you really need to learn, you'll pick up as you go. I think the biggest issue that I had personally when I bought that boat all those years ago was my absolute lack of knowledge about engines. I literally couldn't even drive. I'd never owned a car when I bought that first boat, so I had not even a basic rudimentary knowledge of maintaining and looking after engines or what different pipes did, etc. And that might not sound like a huge deal, but when you basically decide that you're going to live in a steel corridor with an engine bay attached to the back of it, obviously that engine can be slightly more important than one that's sat on the driveway in a car. So for example, that engine is not only giving you propulsion, but it could also be helping provide you with warm water. It could be helping generate electricity, for example. So my absolute lack of any knowledge about engines was definitely a bit of a foolish element to my young, immature mind at that point. Just in case you haven't picked up on it, this video is more tongue-in-cheek rather than being a very serious guarantee of the phases of boat life that you're definitely going to go through and experience exactly as I did. And it's more an excuse for me to talk about boat life, which I absolutely love to do. But I do want to make sure that I do think it's very important that any new or prospective boaters out there have a realistic view of what boat life is and what it can be like. And this is something I've tried to show in my videos, especially over recent years. And it's been quite interesting, and I'd say slightly comical to a certain extent, that after over a decade of me posting all these videos talking about how much I absolutely love boat life, I did 2 videos recently specifically focusing on the negative things and the things that I thought people might not like when they get onto a boat and discover that it's part of the boat life experience. And despite my years and years of relentless optimism and love for boat life, I was then told about how negative I was, etc, etc, when I was just trying to say, look, I know people, multiple people have told me the long, dark, lonely winters on a desolate canal in the back end of nowhere were just too isolating and too miserable for some people to say, you know what, it's worth going through this for all the rest of the year. And so people have chosen to leave boat life just because of that. Whereas I can look at that and think, oh, I love just being on my own in the middle of nowhere, nobody around, no humanity to interfere, just fantastic. But that's of course not the opinion or the desire of every human being. In fact, you could even say that I'm quite antisocial in the fact that I love that seclusion so much. So whereas my what have I done phase was all about the little problems and things that I needed to learn about and fix on the boat, and finding little patches of damp and immediately panicking that the boat was sinking, some people's what have I done moments and phases literally bring an end to their boat life within a year or so of getting on the canal in the first place. So I just want to say directly to any prospective boaters out there that you should always be considering what's the possible negative and downside. It's so easy to look online and see these amazing clips of the summer or the winter and think, wow, I wish I was there. But if you were there for all of the time that's not on film, because it's just average, grey, miserable, etc., you might have a slightly different opinion and you probably wouldn't watch the videos so much either. But I can sum it up perfectly, I think, that I would personally say my favourite and what I think is the best footage I've ever recorded came in 2021 when we had this amazing snowfall and I had the boat moored up by Chirk Aqueduct and Viaduct. So I've got all of this absolutely stereotypical, perfect winter canal scenery. Yet, if I consider the days where I've had that amazing snowy winter weather, and I'd say maybe that's 10 to 20 days tops out of all of my boat life experience, as opposed to the, at minimum, hundreds upon hundreds of really wet, miserable, rainy days that I've had. But of course, those wet, miserable, rainy days don't get any attention or views even when I do post them. So congratulations, you've got through the first and the second phase unscathed. You've decided to stay living on a boat. Now, my friends, it's time for phase 3, acceptance. That this is just life now. That as you go through the various seasons and different parts of boat life become more prominent and less prominent, and you find yourself fitting into the routine of your normal daily life, whether you've got a job that you commute to or whatever that happens to be. You wake up in the morning, if you're out cruising on the canals, you hopefully open those curtains every day onto an unbelievable, beautiful, tranquil, rural scene. Some days it'll be a beautiful sunrise, some days it'll be grey, it'll be hammering down with rain. You might even have had a really bad night's sleep because there was massive raindrops hitting the roof, waking you up, falling from the trees, as well as the wind rocking the boat and battering things around. But you know what? That's just part of boat life, because you're now in phase 3, acceptance. And you know that these things come and go. You know that the good and the bad all slowly start to merge into one lump of experience. Being the nervous, immature character that I was, it took me far too long to get to this point, far too long to realise that all problems can be dealt with one way or another, and that ultimately, once you just start living and stop focusing on the boat itself, and it just becomes your home, and your home then moves around in this amazing rural environment, It's just a fantastic experience if it clicks with you and if you really get it. And I think you've really reached the true point of acceptance when you can stop any sort of obsession or fixation on different mooring points in particular, and be able to just be cruising along and almost on a whim see a rather pleasant looking place to stop and say, you know what, let's pull up here for a night or two. So in case you haven't guessed it yet, I'm a big fan of boat life personally. If you would like to help me out, my friends, please do consider checking out my short boat life books available for the Kindle. One of them's even available as an audiobook, and there's also a paperback which is a collection of the shorter Kindle books together. Thank you so much for tuning in, my friends. Until the next time, have a fantastic day, keep it interesting, keep it boat worthy, and of course, my friends, farewell.